Hello and welcome to today's webinar. In this starter session for European pilots, we will cover how to set up an aircraft profile and the associated mass and balance configuration. It's worth to stay until the end because all participants in the webinar will be given a raffle for an annual license of ForeFlight Performance Plus with European coverage. During this webinar, we will first show how to create an aircraft profile with a Basic Plus or Pro Plus license, and then do the same for a Performance Plus license. We are covering changing the units of measurements and the associated conversions of values, and continue with the filing configuration, which is important for submitting flight plans and Eurocontrol valid routing. Finally, we cover how to create profiles and how these profiles can be shared with other pilots. The second part of the webinar is about creating mass and balance profiles. In the beginning, a few housekeeping items. Questions can be asked via the message panel and will be answered during the webinar. Please send unanswered questions by email to team@foreflight.com. If you have technical problems, please try restarting the webinar. That webinar will be recorded and later broadcasted on foreflight.com/webinars. In the first part, I will show you how to create an aircraft profile as a Basic Plus or Pro Plus subscriber of ForeFlight Mobile. To do this, we switch to the airplane view and tap on the plus at the top left to create a new airplane. Mandatory information is always highlighted in yellow. Here is a tail number. In the case, I will use DR400 as a tail number for the webinar. The aircraft type is then determined. If DR40 is entered into the search line, a number of associated models appear. If this applies to the aircraft to be created, you should choose a model with details of the engine, as this will already be stored with the corresponding performance profiles when switching to a Performance Plus license later. After selecting the aircraft type, the corresponding performance profile must be created. This is done by selecting Add Basic Performance Profile. After optionally assigning a profile name, at least the flight speed in cruise flight and the associated fuel consumption must be specified. Here for the webinar, I call the profile 75% and add the manual values for this power setting. Optional settings for climb and descent performance have been added here. The performance profile can be defined as a standard profile for flight planning use by tapping on Make Default. This is how the new created profile will be displayed in the list. Additional profiles can optionally be added here. In the overview, the created profile is listed as the default, a standard profile. This process is slightly different with a Performance Plus license. While the tail number must be first specified here, with Performance Plus, the selection of an aircraft type is mandatory. For the purpose of the webinar, I will refer to the tail number as DA40 and add DA40 into the search line. A number of related DA40 models with different engine and prop combinations appear. You can see a number of stored profiles based on the operating manuals, and also takeoff and landing performance values and mass and balance templates are available for some of the models. By the way, the mass and balance templates are also available with a Basic Plus or Pro Plus license. For the webinar, I choose a DA40 next generation with Austro engine and continue with that aircraft. After selecting the type, it will also be displayed in the overview. There are also 4 pre-configured performance profiles available. These performance profiles are created based on the aircraft manufacturer manuals, but no profile is currently defined as a standard profile. You can make individual adjustments by correcting the flight speed and fuel consumption for the specific aircraft. This profile can also be set as a default profile. In that case, you will see the default remark behind the profile. For aircraft models with takeoff and landing performance profiles, you can first check whether the calculation is available for the specific aircraft based on the serial number. For the DA40 next generation, the runway profile is available for all serial numbers. In the field performance section, the standard values for the runway surface or the safety distance factor for flight planning can be set. This would complete the creation of an aircraft with a Performance Plus license. All further information refers to all license levels. We now check the aircraft masses. To do this, first scroll down. The values are already specified by selecting the aircraft type and are based on the aircraft manuals. At first, I adjust the mass unit from pounds to kilograms. All values are also converted at the same time. The value for the basic empty mass must now be adjusted from the aircraft's current weighting report. This value will also be used later in the mass and balance configuration. After checking again for correctness, you can browse further. Following is a fuel configuration. Only the fuel type, the unit, and quantity for engine warm-up, taxiing, and starting must be entered for Basic Plus or Pro Plus license holders. With the Performance Plus license, the total amount of fuel and the reserve fuel policy is added. I set the fuel unit again to metric unit to liters, convert the values. Then you can, if you like, correct the value for start, taxi, and takeoff fuel. And as holder of a Performance Plus license, you can determine the reserve fuel policy that will be applied, with ICAO being the correct value for general aviation. Part NCC or Part NCO policies in accordance with EASA regulations are also available for the operation of certain aircraft types or operating modes. Next comes the filing configuration, which is essential when submitting flight plans or creating Eurocontrol valid routes. The key points here are equipment, for example, the existing navigation and communication equipment, surveillance, which is the possibility of the transponder, and performance-based navigation, That means the fulfillment of certain accuracy values of the equipment. Information about the individual values can be found on the ForeFlight website. Here you can also find configuration examples if certain devices are installed. Same is value for transponder types. An individual configuration can be created for each category mentioned by selecting the relevant points. Here's an example of a fully configured IFR-capable machine like the DA40. Further information can be stored under Other Information. For example, the operator of the aircraft or the registration, or as long as different letter combination was created as a call sign, like in that example when I used DA40 as a tail number. All these values are then transferred to the flight plan when doing a flight plan. If you have questions how to fill out the other information, these values can be found, or this information can be found in the filing guide in the ForeFlight Documents tab. Last point of the aircraft configuration is the emergency equipment, such as ELT, life jackets, or dinghies. At the very bottom of the page, the aircraft can be set as a default aircraft for flight planning, or when configuring several similar aircraft, the profile can also be copied and later adjusted. With a Send To button in the top right corner of the screen, you can share the created aircraft profile with other pilots. They will get a link that opens ForeFlight Mobile and adds the aircraft to their individual data. We continue with the mass and balance configuration. In the aircraft setup, first we adjust the unit for the length in the center of gravity measurements for the respective aircraft. This setting can be changed to centimeter for our DA40. Then we go to More and switch to Mass and Balance. Unless no profile is selected, you will be prompted to do so. A list of existing profiles is shown, and a new profile can be created by tapping the plus. In the first step, you have to select the aircraft for which a new profile is to be created, the DA40. For the DA40, we have a number of different templates available, depending on the individual aircraft. We select the 4-seat arrangement with standard baggage and tube. The values for the empty mass and the center of gravity can be taken from the weighing report of the aircraft. Entering the empty mass requires confirmation. If the correct empty mass was already specified when creating the aircraft profile, this is now available as a selection here. The center of gravity is entered. In the case of that specific DA40 from the webinar, these are 248 centimeters. All stations with correct values and arms are already stored in the template, and you only need to check for correctness. Additional values can be added via Add Station. Additional stations can be added for additional seats, row of seats, cargo stations, or fuel tanks. Or if you have specific aircraft items like a mobile oxygen system, tools, or anything similar, you can add a specific station for that part here. Even if the templates were created using the aircraft manuals, it is advisable to also check the information for the envelope and adapt if necessary. In the envelope, you can see the values for the maximum takeoff mass, the maximum landing mass, or the maximum zero fuel mass. The created profile can now be shared with other pilots using the Send To button. After the creation, the new measure mass and balance profile appears in the list and can be used for flight preparation. The load can now be defined for every single seat. When adding a load, there is the option to add a description, and this saves this load for future planning. Alternatively, a selection can be made from a list of default values. The default values by themselves can be adjusted in the app settings. A load saved with description can be retrieved as saved load in the following list. And here is what an example configuration looks like. Now we add the fuel quantities. In the case of that aircraft, we fill up the tank with 153 liters, adjust the amount of fuel required for taxiing, and put in the required fuel amount for the flight to the destination. You can find the resulted graph in the right side of the screen and the detailed numbers further down. The center of gravity calculation can be viewed as a document using the summary switch. You can now, via the Send To button, email that mass and balance calculation, or print it or save it on your device for later review. Now let's come to a case where no mass and balance template exists for a specific aircraft. First of all, we have to create a new profile again. Usually you have the question where to get the numbers. Here in that case, I downloaded an old aircraft manual for the DR 400, 180 remorqueur. And you can see in the document the maximum takeoff weight, the maximum landing weight. You can see the numbers for the envelope. You find information about the fuel tanks or the specific arms for the stations. With this information, we select the DR 400 as an aircraft we want to create the new profile for. Since there is no prepared template available, blank template must be selected. Again, the values for the empty aircraft from the weighing report must first be entered. I also renamed the profile to DR 400 180 Remo. In the cockpit with 2 seats, a luggage compartment and a fuel tank are already specified as minimum configuration, but without stored values for the gravity arms. This has to be adjusted now. To do this, select the cockpit and enter the center of gravity arm. The names of the seats can be also changed or additional seats can be added. Limitations can also be specified in the details, or a specific station can be stated that that station should be used as part of the basic operating mass during the calculation. For the second row of seats, select Add Station and Row of Seats. For these, the arm needs to be set and the second seats need to be added. For fuel, I start with the main tank, which is located at the back of the DR400. I call it Fuel Aft and put in the arm of 1 meter 12 or 79.2 kilogram, which corresponds to the 110 liter fuel capacity in that main tank. We add another fuel tank, and this is a fuel tank on the front right. Since the front left tank has the same center of gravity and the same amount of fuel, we can create it using the Copy Station button. We only have to rename the tank accordingly, and it's done. The last point is determining the center of gravity for the luggage compartment. It's 1.9 meters. To do this, open the station and enter the values. Now that configuration of the stations is completed. Next is entering the values for the front and back limits of the envelope. Again, these values can be found in the aircraft manual. It should be noted in this example that only one limit is set for the rear value, which applies to all masses. After entering the values, the envelope is displayed. Please note that the maximum mass of 1,100 kg is entered, as that profile should be specified or used for the normal category. However, the DR400 Remo can also be operated in the utility category. To do this, we copy the profile we just created and select one copy for customization. We change the name to utility and need to adjust the maximum takeoff value in the envelope. The 950 kilogram needs to be entered. Now we have two mass and balance profiles available for that specific aircraft. If you go back to the aircraft tab and select the DR400, you can find both profiles now in the aircraft configuration. If you have a Performance Plus license, the center of gravity calculation can also be carried out directly in the flight planning. The fuel in that case is taken over directly from the required fuel in the flight planning. In this example, for a flight from Innsbruck to Selamli with a DR400, you can immediately choose whether the flight should be carried out in a normal or utility category. Let's go to the summary. Today's webinar showed how to create performance profiles, convert units, and share profiles with various ForeFlight licenses. In addition, several ways to create a mass and balance profile were discussed. For free trial of the ForeFlight mobile app, you can register at foreflight.com/30day Europe. On the website, you also get information about current or previous releases. You can register for webinars or rewatch recording webinars. Our support team can be reached via email at team@foreflight.com. Now let's move on to answering some questions asked during the webinar. Yeah, and there are some questions. One interesting regarding multiple tank systems. Keith, could you please show my iPad? Okay, thank you. So the question was coming from a different aircraft, from the Bonanza with tip tanks. And the question is when tanks or fuel is transferred from one tank to another one, how can we make it? So because that is very depending on the way the pilot is managing the fuel. The way to do it is here. We have in that case in the main fuel tank full 110 liters. In the front left tank we have 20 liters, so we can transfer 20 liters in each tank. So what I do, I remove the 20 liters from that tank and add it to that tank, and then we have the adjusted mass and balance profile. So what you could do when it's done during the flight, create a new summary and then store it, and so that you can keep a history of changed mass and balance during the flight. I hope that has answered the question. So the next question is regarding fuel density. So the density is not manually adjustable, but when selecting a different type of fuel, the related fuel density is used, especially when using enhanced flight planning, enhanced mass and balance in ForeFlight Plus license. Is it possible to create an aircraft fleet and several profiles for each of the aircraft from ForeFlight Web? Yes, of course. You can do all the things as well in ForeFlight Web. You create an aircraft, so more or less a basic aircraft of your fleet with all the settings, then copy that aircraft, change the tail numbers to the aircraft on your fleet, and so if you have the same profiles for every aircraft, you can create the mass and balance profiles first and then copy the aircraft. Otherwise, you have to create the different profiles for every single aircraft. So because the aircrafts are not differing that much, so it's easier to create one aircraft as a example aircraft with all the required settings and profiles, copy that aircraft that times to meet the number of aircraft in your fleet, and then do the manual adjustments of empty weight, empty aircraft CG, or any other special equipment on board. That's the easiest way to do it. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for attending. And yeah, then the next webinar, we are talking about flight planning. Have a great evening.